Erev Tov. We are continuing in the introduction of Rabban Rambam to his Mishneh Torah. Last night we wrapped up a little bit about Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. And today I asked you to think a little bit about the answer to the following question. Let's read it on page Lamed Tet of the Rambam Mishneh Torah. Chamisha Talmidim hayu lo Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. There were 5 students of Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. V'hem gedolei Chachamim shekiblu mimeno. And they are from the greater of the Chachamim that received from him. Ve'elohem, and these are their names. Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol, otherwise known as Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus. My wife has it. Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Yosef Kohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Natanel, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. These are the 5 students of Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. And we asked last night, why, if we know that Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai had so many students, so why are we only mentioning 5? Chamisha Talmidim hayu lo. He had 5 students. Rabbi Yosef Masas last night told us that the answer to this question is in the word lo, for him. He had for him 5 students. It's like if you need the screen to go back more, it's okay. And so I asked you last night to please think about it a little bit and come up with some answers that might reflect the relationship between a rabbi and student, a teacher and a student in general, that might explain why these 5 are mentioned more than the others. And we already started a few thoughts yesterday, like those who were the most famous of them, they were the best of the thousands of students that existed. And today I'm asking you to tell me more. Why? What makes a student qualitatively better than another student?
More students than everybody else.
I mean, they were the students who had more students than everybody else.
Everybody else was probably by himself, or took his corner or so on, but those probably just new shivot to spread the knowledge out.
So these were the most prominent among them. Now I would say that might be true. The only hesitancy that I have is we're asking what makes them greater as Talmidim. He only has 5 students. The fact that they have students, does it really make them greater students?
I think so, yes. I had a similar answer to
Tell
what
me.
Was just said.
That's my father's.
Yeah, right, to what your father said. Is that those 5 students maybe were once leaders in their own right. Is that it's one thing to become a student, to be a receiver of knowledge, but the whole point of having students is to continue your Masorah. So those students were the greatest because they were leaders for the next generation, like, and continued his Masorah.
Okay, so you're saying something almost the same, but with another nuance you added here. And so, one, my father mentioned that these are the students who had the students themselves. You are mentioning a matter of they're the ones essentially who are succeeding the rabbi in terms of transmitting the oral Torah. I think that you could actually, you can read that in the words of the Rambam, that these are the greatest 5 shekiblu mimeno, that received Kabbalah from him. Meaning it's not just that they were his students, but they were his students in the sense that they received the transmission from him, ultimately turning them into the 5 students who then pass on the Torah Shebaal Peh to the next generation. Any other ideas?
I think they are great by themselves. Everybody is different. They were not all the same.
That they were not all the same is true, but what about the thousands of other students? Why are these 5 better than them?
Because they follow in a way, every one of them follow his way in a different way.
And the 1,000 other ones?
We don't know about them, they didn't mention them.
That's why I'm asking, why didn't we mention them? What's so special about these 5?
Like the lady said, they're
probably the 5 that passed on the tradition to the next generation.
Okay, so I see that we're still mentioning this is a good idea. I think that's the pshat, by the way. Pshat is that these are the 5. These are the 5 that passed on their tradition of Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. Zev, we're asking why these 5 students stick out. What's the quality of a student that makes one stick out more than the thousands of other students that he has? Let me walk you through what Rabbi Yosef Masas shares with us. So if you open up the PDF that's attached to the Zoom invitation in the Google Classroom, at the bottom of that PDF you will see where it mentions the PDF's 5 students of Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai, maybe actually what it's titled. And you'll find ourselves on page 362 in the writings of Rabbi Yosef Masas on Perkei Avot, the 2nd volume. So you see there's a paragraph with vowels on top, that's the Mishnah. You then see paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3. Paragraph 4 begins with the letter Aleph. That letter Aleph is what we're up to right now. So answer number 1. Rabbi Yosef Masas for 5 students has 5 answers. You see the first difference between these 5 students and the other thousands of students. Yesh Talmid sheyesh lo rav kavua. There's a student who has a teacher who is their regular teacher. V'yesh lo od harbe morim aray. And he has many other temporary teachers. It's not the best word. Irregular teachers. I mean, there's one person who's his rabbi, but he still goes to classes over here, classes over there, listens to this, listens to that. He still has other teachers. Shelomed etzlam eze shaot b'yom. He studies from them a few hours a day. Or balayla, maybe in the evenings when the rabbi doesn't teach, or b'Shabbat, or in Shabbat when the rabbi, or b'chodesh, or on Rosh Chodesh. Meaning there are certain times where they go to the classes of this other rabbi. So they have one rabbi, but they have other rabbis they like learning from. V'kasher teshaluhu, it said mi lomed, and if you ask him, so who do you learn by? Yomar etzed peloni, he'll tell you the main rabbi, dainu hakavua, his main rabbi. Ve'no maskir achrim, he doesn't mention to you every single Torah class he goes to. I mean, someone asks you which Beit HaKnesset you go to. You probably mention the main one you go to. You don't also make a list of every minyan you've ever prayed in your life. The same thing with a rabbi and a student. Oftentimes, the student just says the name of the main rabbi they learn from, though there are others. Machar shem arai, because they're just not the main rabbis. There must be a better word than not the main. The secondary rabbis. Surrogate rabbis. I don't know if that word. He doesn't mention them. V'yesh en lo shum rav arai. Rak echad kavua. There are some who don't have any rav arai. There is no temporary rabbi. There is no secondary rabbi. They have one rabbi. Ven yado zaza mitoch yado b'shum zaman. And their hand never leaves their hand ever. Literally it means, that's what it literally means. What it means is that this is their only rabbi. They only learn Torah from this person. V'chol torato hirak mimenu. And a bulk of his Torah is only from this person. There's a halakha like this in Shulchan Aruch, if you're familiar.
Is that the one where you're supposed to have yourself a rabbi?
That's a Mishnah in Perkei Avot. You should make for yourself a rabbi. But there's a specific halakha. Lo aleinu lo alechem. If someone's rabbi dies, there are certain mourning rituals that one must do over them. And that depends on how much of a rabbi they are to you. Did you learn most of your wisdom from them, some of your wisdom from them, all of your wisdom from them? In olden days, by the way, every time a Talmid Chacham passed away, we used to rip our clothing, and that was a norm. That's the law in the Shulchan Aruch. I can't tell you why today it is the way it looks. V'zeh tefei ma'aleh. This is better. Me'halomed mikama morim. The one who has one set. Hi, Halevis. This is.
Guess if bedtime happened.
Bedtime clearly didn't happen. That's better than somebody who learns from many different teachers. Like it says specifically in Masechet Avot. Yoshua ben Perachia Omer, Yoshua the son of Perachia says, Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a rabbi. וכך פירשו במגן אבות דרשב"ץ, שם משמד גמרא אבות הזרע, you want שם. And the other Chachamim will say something similar about this. So what's category number one of a student? There's two types of students. There are rabbis who have students that are committed to them, only to them. They learn from them, everything from them. And there's some who dance at all the different parties. They have a main rabbi, not to take away from that, but they go elsewhere. I'll tell you the truth. I used to learn this Gemara, Aseh lecha rav. I used to get very, I wouldn't say anxious, not in a mental health way, but it's sort of like you're going to get stuck. Like you get stuck with one rabbi, you never understand the other perspective. And it bothered me. Now there are mefarshim there, by the way, who explain that logic and things that are related to expanding your mind, you should learn from many different rabbis. When it comes to halakha, a path that needs consistency, that's best to learn from one person. It doesn't mean to limit yourself to one person. But it means that in areas that require consistency, you should follow that one consistent approach. Now, I've explained to you differently. Rabbi Yosef Qafih, this translation of the Rambam is very different than how we're discussing this right now. I'll leave that for right now. I'll tell you. So, Rambam explains that Aseh lecha rav doesn't mean make for yourself a rabbi, like in the Hasidic sense of having some grand master who you bow down to and this is your world. Rather, Aseh lecha rav, there should be an authority in your life, somebody who you are able to, when you study Torah, you know the laws of Shabbat, you're learning the laws of Shabbat. When you need to make a decision, there's someone you trust to consult with. Someone who literally becomes your counterpart in studying Torah. Yeah, they might know more than you. That's exactly why you have them. But they're there in order to enhance your decision-making process, not to cripple you to not make any decisions. Yeah. But here I'm telling you that Aseh lecha rav in no way means that type of crippling vertical behavior anyways. I always felt pressured by this Mishnah until I met Mori Harav Yaakov Peretz. Should live and be well. It's been the longest time that I haven't seen him since I left Israel. I always made a point every year to be by him, and COVID did its thing, and we're almost coming up on 2 years now. Sa'ad Hashem. I should see him in good health. Harav Peretz, when I came to him and I learned by him, so you've heard parts of the story before. My first reaction was actually one of revulsion. I couldn't handle what he was saying. Too much of what he was saying made me upset. It's why sometimes people tell me, you're so patient with those people who ask the same question. I said, I was once that person. I was once the person who wasn't able to accept willingly the things that I was being taught. And so the patience that my rabbi had with me is the courtesy I wish to extend to other people when I can. But once I began learning with Harav Peretz, and I became involved in this approach, it became very difficult for me to listen to anybody else. Very difficult. I wanted to go study other shiurim, things that other Chachamim would say, and I have, Baruch Hashem, I've exposed myself to other Chachamim. But it comes to learning another area of halakha. Every time I sit in a shiur and I hear a rabbi teach halakha, and I feel Harav Peretz would have said this differently. He would have explained it better. He wouldn't have lied like you lied about that commentary. He wouldn't have made the mistake that you made in that mistake. There's a certain connection in that Bet HaMidrash that I can't take away. What can I do? And I once told him that I'm upset at him for, because it's not allowed me to go places that I would have liked to go. But on the other hand, it's really given me the ability to say, this is my rabbi, and I believe very much that I would consider myself his student. And so in this way, says Rabbi Yosef Masas, these students of Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai are completely different from the thousands of other students. The thousands of other students also learn by Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. You ask them, who's your rabbi? Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. Then where do you go study? Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. But really, what do? Shabbat, they're by this rabbi. Pesach, they're by that rabbi. Tuesday nights, they go to that rabbi. So they do have Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai as their rabbi, but they're all over the place. And so these are the 5 students that didn't leave the side of Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. What do you think? Yeah? Okay. Answer number 2. Wait. We can say the same thing by Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. He had thousands of students that studied by him regularly. ולמדו גם מפי אחרים ארעי. And they learned by others in an arai fashion, in a temporary fashion. ומסוג השני היו לו רק 5 תלמידים הללו. But from the second category of 5 students that were always by his side, he only had 5. שלא למדו שום דבר מאחרים רק ממנו. They didn't learn anything else from anybody else aside from him. וזה אמר, and about that they say, 5 תלמידים היו לו. 5 students he had. לא, דייקה, specifically they were his, meaning they didn't go anywhere else. כי לא לבדו היו ואין האחרים חלק בהם, because they were his students and nobody else's students.
This is like Yehoshua
I was just thinking of that parallel. Yeshua, it says the young man, Yeshua, never left the tent of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's very reminiscent of that. This is the tent that they stayed in. Page 363. The second answer. Yesh Talmid. This is a hard one for me to read. We'll read it anyways. Yesh Talmid, there are some students. Halomed mirabo rak Torah. They only learn from their rabbis Torah. What does it mean, Torah?
Well, that could be more just textual.
Yeah, they come to learn Torah. Literally the text the rabbi's teaching.
Not the life of
Very good. Ve'eno ochez b'midot rabo. But they're not interested in grabbing onto the character traits of their rabbi. For example, in Rabo Chasid, if his rabbi is a righteous man, hu pashut. He's a simple man. What do you mean simple? Follows all the halachot, but no piety there. Or the hefech, or the opposite. Im Rabbo Nadiv, hu kilai. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. If his rabbi is generous, he's a miser. He's a cheapskate. Or the hefech, or the opposite. Chayotze b'zeh, b'shar midot. And like this, you can apply to any of the character traits. I read a story once. Rabbi Herschel Schachter. It's not usually stopping grounds, but I once was in a place. The book they had was about Rav Soloveitchik, written by Rabbi Herschel Schachter. I went through the book. It's very difficult for me when I read halachot. Very often, the manipulation of text to fit an Ashkenazi custom or something like that, bothers me deeply. It bothers me when Sephardic people do it too. I just don't appreciate. If you want to do what you want to do it, but don't manipulate a text to tell me that's how you should do it. And I saw too much of that in the book. But in the footnotes, one of the footnotes of the book, as you know, Rav Soloveitchik, as a young man, maybe you don't know, was raised in a very staunchly Lithuanian family. Like from the Sions of Lithuania. They're not just regular Lithuanians. The Soloveitchik family, if I had to say, are Lithuanians on steroids. No disrespect, but they're like the epitome of. And when he was a young boy, his parents sent him to Cheder. The better Cheder in town was a Chabad Hasidic Cheder in Europe. As Rabbi Soloveitchik, the little kid, would go there. Legend has it that when his grandfather would come visit the Cheder, he would cover up his Tanya with a Gemara, so nobody should see that he's studying Tanya in the Cheder. Fast forward many years. If you know Rabbi Soloveitchik's Talmud classes, sometimes there was standing room only. Some they would go 3 hours, 4 hours, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, huge auditoriums, standing room only. Rashi Yeshiva would come, big rabbis would come to hear. You know, Rabbi Soloveitchik was not just a Talmudist, but he was also a master orator. If you've heard him speak, there are a few recordings of him. Even when he speaks in Yiddish, they have English subtitles. I didn't learn Yiddish overnight. He knows how to hold an audience. He's a teacher par excellence. That's what he was. Though I'm not from his students and not related. Rav Soloveitchik announced in the yeshiva university, that he wants to begin a shiur in Chassidut. Particularly in one of the books of the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, Likutei Torah, or I don't remember which one, but one of those two. And he was so excited. Finally, he felt comfortable enough with his students to teach them a little bit about the side of him that appreciated Chassidut. You can imagine, learning Chassidut from Rav Soloveitchik would be quite a trip. I mean, that would be a pretty interesting experience. And he announced his class. They put up flyers in Yeshiva University. And when it came time for the class, it was Rabbi Herschel Schachter and 2 other guys. And after 2 weeks, the other 2 guys dropped out. And Rav Hershel Schachter looked at his rabbi, Rabbi Soloveitchik. And Rabbi Soloveitchik told him, he said, they want my brain, but they don't want my heart. It was a very powerful teaching, that teaching there. I think there's a whole world of people that likes rabbis, leaders in any way for their brains. But leave us out of your heart. Don't tell us the things we don't want to hear. And I've experienced this very often in many places. So there's a crowd online that learns with us, not you. If you're here, you're not part of that crowd. And for them, if I would give a class on how to make Cheetos kosher, you would have a packed auditorium. You drop a pin. LA, New York, full house. Yeah, how to make, Uncle Ben's rice. Like if we did something like that, that would be a world-class shiur. But if I would give a shiur on Yichud Hashem, how to truly understand the oneness of the Creator of the universe. Ma'aseh b'kavad. I'm not saying I'm holding that. I'm just giving an example. It'll probably just be those of us sitting around the table right now. Because there are some people, they don't want more than that. They just want to know that they're potato chips, they can eat them without a hechsher. That's what makes them happy. But cater to those people too. But then don't fool yourself. When someone says, we, in this house, we follow the halachot of Yonatan Halevy. You're not really. You, by the potato chips, in the potato chip section, you follow those halachot. Where else? Do you really know what it means to be part of this kehillat?
That's the difference between a technician and a scholar, I feel. It's like, if you just know how to do protocols and what to do on people, if you don't know why you're doing it, it's totally robotic and automatic. Don't you want to know why we do kashrut and what it means, the purpose of it in the first place? Just, I can go here, I can't go there.
Unfortunately, the scholars have already been replaced by technicians. So it's technicians learning from technicians. I mean, we're not. I think we're in a place. I recently told them, somebody asked me a very good question. I told them the only way you can answer this question is if you read the following book. The only way. No, I don't like to read. So how do you want me to answer your question? They asked me another question. I said, listen, the only way the statement was as follows. I love the answers to these questions, but how come I can't learn them on my own? Something like that. I said, you can. You just have to commit a serious amount of time to learning Torah. Come. We learn here a whole week. Come on Zoom. Join us. Learn Torah. It's too much work. Well, if it's too much work, then you can't expect to get anything out of it. Limud Torah is more than just a moment in time. It's more than just a nice Dvar Torah in the parasha. There are people who they come to the Knesset, they hear the rabbi's sermon, and that's the whole Limud Torah they do the whole week. And even if they're awake during the rabbi's speech, and sometimes the rabbi doesn't even give a speech that has any Torah inside of it, and so sometimes you can have a person go for months not learning Torah. So here, says Rabbi Yosef Mesas, Yesh Talmid mitchake al kol inyanei rabo. There is a student who imitates, not in a cheap way, but who emulates, that's the better word, emulates the character traits of their rabbi. Lomed mimeno Torah, they study Torah from that person, v'ochez b'midotav u'ma'asav, but they also hold on to the character traits and the actions of this person. But that's the reason why our rabbis warned us against studying from Torah scholars who are crooked in their character traits. Because the nature of a true student is to want to emulate their teacher. It's very hard to divorce a person's mind from their actions. They say there was once an ethics professor in university walking with his students, and the ethics professor sees a wallet on the side of the road. So he picks up the wallet, and he takes out the driver's license, throws it in the trash, takes out the cash, puts it in his pocket, and walks down the road. And the students they can't believe it, they're surprised, they're in shock. Said, Professor, how could you take the wallet? He said, it was on the floor. He said, but you're supposed to be an ethics professor. He said, the guy next door to me in room 403, he's a geometry professor. You don't expect him to be a triangle, do you? That's the world in which we're operating today. You see a Talmid Chacham, they do crazy things. No, I know Torah, but who said I'm a tzaddik? You don't have Yirat Shamayim, so get out of the world of Torah.
The Rebbe once told a story about Aristotle. One of the students caught him in a compromising position. And Aristotle answered, when you see me doing this, I'm not being Aristotle.
Very good. There's a joke related afterwards. עד שכל היודע את רבו ורואה את תלמידו, And this student reaches a place that anyone who knows the rabbi and then meets the student, you don't know that this student studied by that rabbi. Already on your own, you could guess, based on this person's actions, who their rabbi is. And that's the same thing about these 5 students. That they held on to their rabbi's character traits, not just his Torah. And everybody who saw one of these 5 students, they didn't need to ask who was your rabbi. They knew by watching them, this is the student of Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. And that's why it says hayu lo. They were for him. Bedomim lo. They were similar to him. Betorah, vira, in yirat shamayim, uvechol midat tova, and every good character trait. Notice they didn't emulate negative character traits. They emulated positive character traits. Arav Peretz once was speaking with me, not so long ago. We mentioned something came up. It was an interesting conversation. And Arav Peretz told me, he said, I'm very afraid of this generation. I said, why are you so afraid? What's going to happen? They converted him to the iPhone thing. Like, what's going to happen now? He said, it's the first generation that I've observed large amounts of Talmidei Chachamim, large numbers of Talmidei Chachamim, who do not possess 1 ounce of yirat shamayim. They have Torah wisdom, but fear of heaven they don't have. And I don't want to mention names that were mentioned there, but the world around us is very frightening. Someone's a big rabbi, knows a lot of Torah, knows a lot of Gemara, but are they striving for righteousness? Are they kind people? Are they pious people? Are they good people? Would you trust them with your kids? Would you trust them with your wallet? It's probably a better one than your kids. They probably don't want your kids to have enough of their own. But a wallet, would you trust them with your wallet? And look, we've already expected this to be the norm. You live in a generation where people can make a list. You mention a rabbi's name, they'll drop to you, not things that they assume, rumors, rabbis that have been indicted for crimes, real crimes, major crimes. And what do? Not you, I'm not talking to you, right? Your friends, what do? They still donate every month, and they go there every month. Chaz v'shalom, you should speak lashon hara about them. There's a rabbi I spoke about here almost 5 years ago. Just recently, he was arrested again for I don't even know how many times, for being part of a murder plot in the 80s, 70s or 80s. And you think anyone's going to do anything about it? He's just another martyr at the hands of the Satan who's coming to stop the Mashiach from coming. Half of you have books of his students in your house. And when I say you, I mean you. Because today, if you're a rabbi who's a murderer, a molester, a rapist, you mentioned, and in the names, a financial crimes expert, not just guilty of an expert of financial crimes, fraud, that's okay. Shlita, you always make sure to say Shlita at the end of his name. He should live a long life. But Chas v'Shalom, he should tell you that if you're Ashkenazi, you could follow the Shulchan Aruch and eat rice on Pesach. You could take away a rabbi's semicha for that. Or he should tell you that on Yom Tov, there are opinions that are different than what you've heard about before about electricity or about Giyur. God forbid they will tell you those things. They're not a rabbi anymore. The other ones, big rabbis, not little, big rabbis. They come out of prison, celebrations for them. That's the crazy Jewish world you're a part of. Because we've already accepted that Talmidei Chachamim don't need yirat shamayim. That you can just have a Talmid Chacham, yeah, he knows a lot of Torah. Who needs yirat shamayim? It's a very frightening thing. And we're living in a generation where this is the peak of it. We're surrounded by Talmidei Chachamim who don't have yirat shamayim. And Talmidei Chachamim who have yirat shamayim, something fascinating. I recently told somebody that in my short lifetime, I've had the merit and the demerit, can I say? To rub shoulders with many different Talmidei Chachamim. Those who were genuinely Talmidei Chachamim, who had yirat shamayim, regardless of their background, if they are Sephardim or Ashkenazim or Temanim or Hasidim or Chabad or Vizhnitz or wherever they came from, but they were genuine Talmidei Chachamim with yirat shamayim, you could sit down and we could get lost in conversation for 5 hours. eating the same food, singing songs together. Somehow you take away the Yirat Shamayim, and everything falls apart. When our rabbis say, Talmidei Chachamim Mavim Shalom Ba'olam, Torah scholars increase peace in the world, people think it's a joke, like it was a question mark, like do Torah scholars increase peace in the world? But the answer is, if you've ever seen Talmidei Chachamim who have Yirat Shamayim interact with each other, then you will never see something so peaceful in your life. A beautiful relationship. We should merit to the days where we find Talmidei Chachamim, students of Chachamim, who not just emulate their rabbis in terms of knowledge, but also embody their character traits and their personality and their midot, and teach us to do the same with them. B'ezrat Hashem. I will take any questions that Rambam anybody has. We'll continue with the next three answers.